Hello and welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Murrumbidgee people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 20th of November 2023. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item number 2 is apologies. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, is unable to be with us this evening. With that apology noted, everyone else is present and correct. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associate. Are there any declarations from councillors? There being none, thank you. I move now on to our omnibus item, item number 4. The first one, 4.1, being the confirmation of the minutes, and that is that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 30th of October 2023 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? There being none, moving on now to 4.2, Mayor's Communications, and my diary entries from the 31st of October through to the 20th of November 2023 have been circulated, as well as Deputy Mayor Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Chong representing me at different events as well. I thank them as always for that. Moving in now on to 4.2.2, I'd like to table the Business and Employment South East Tasmania Inc. AGM minutes from the 27th of September 2023, as well as their annual report. So thank you, CEO. 4.3, council workshops as listed in the agenda. Tabling a petition. CEO, are there any petitions?
No, Mayor.
Yeah, great, thank you. We move now on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. The first one being the Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker, is there anything you wish to highlight?
Not in this agenda, only to note that the AGM is Thursday of this week and it precedes a risk appetite workshop and other matters.
Wonderful, thank you very much. The Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority quarterly report is listed in our agenda. Councillor Warren, is there anything that you'd wish to add at this stage?
Just to say that it's early days yet, still working on the strategic report and agreeing on the major directions for the group. And I do commend the report to people if they want to know more.
Wonderful, and thank you for representing council on that body as well. We moved on to Tas Water Corporation, and I will be attending the general meeting in Launceston on Wednesday, and I'll provide an update following that meeting. With regards to the Greater Hobart Committee, our next meeting is scheduled for Friday the 1st of December, and again I'll provide an update following that meeting as well. Colleagues, are there any other reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies? Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have provided the minutes from Cycling South for June 23, which were recently approved, the Richmond Advisory Committee for October 23, and the recent Richmond Bicentenary Committee minutes, and I'm asked as part of that to give a special thank you to all of the council staff that have been involved in making things happen in Richmond so that it looks lovely for the bicentenary. It's touched pretty well every aspect of council, I think, in the recent few weeks, and I will have one to table in closed meeting too.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Chong, and I'm sure that we'll pass on that appreciation by the CEO and Ms Coburn to all the staff who've been involved. So thank you for that lovely mention. Moving now on to four. Oh, sorry.
I'm just seeking your guidance in terms of council advisory committees and working groups. Given that under the new structure, the working groups are sort of subordinate to and feeding into the advisory committees, is it expected that working group minutes or reports will be tabled here, or no? Thank you.
Thank you. That's pretty clear. Yeah. Thank you. That's a very good question. Thank you, Councillor Hugh. Are there any other reports to be tabled? There being no, we move now on to 4.6, weekly briefing reports, and the weekly briefing reports of the 30th of October and the 6th and 13th of November have been circulated to councillors. noting the advice contained in the 6th of November weekly briefing report regarding a planning appeal regarding 4 Lincoln Street Linders Farm, development application approved by consent in TASCAT. Are there any other matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you. The weekly briefing report of the 6th of November, the Chief Financial Officer approved budget's variations. On page 29, it refers to, amongst other things, the Rosny Bowles car park lighting upgrade facilities. Under the budget heading, it says reclassification only from roads projects to facilities projects. Whilst the location of the project is in the car park, the nature of the project is facility upgrade in nature. Does that imply that the lighting upgrade is for the use of the RSL and also the Bowls Club on an ongoing basis?
Thank you for your question, Councillor James. Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The original budget proposal for this was to address the street light, which is effectively adjacent Bastic Street on the road. But in doing so, we will be decommissioning this light and putting in a new light off the facility of the Rosny Bowls Club, which is there mostly for security purposes to assist the users of that facility, such that the budget was transferred from roads to facilities.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor James.
The weekly briefing report of the 13th of November, the Cambridge Oval Master Plan upgrade to School Association, update to School Association Chair. There is a very lengthy communication from Prue Allen, of which she refers to, amongst other things, that working with council has proved difficult every step of the way, but I'm starting to feel it's impossible. I have seen councillors come and go, and the Mayor and General Manager.
Councillor James.
My question is...
Excuse me, Councillor James. Please be very careful when you're in this place. We all read that correspondence. It's not appropriate, however, to read out in public comments on it. That someone's opinion is not something that I want to have aired in this chamber. Thank you.
Okay,
so
well...
Councillor James.
Yeah, my question is...
Councillor James.
Yes.
Excuse me. Let me be very clear about this. No one comes into this chamber, be an elected member or a member of the public, or be one of their piece of their correspondence that sheds a less than flattering light or in some way, Have you finished, Councillor James?
No, I was waiting for you to finish.
Okay, well, sorry, you're distracting me. Please keep it above board. That's what I'm saying. All right, thank you.
So, in response to her letter, will council be writing to the outgoing chair of the school association to thank her for a letter and basically wish her the best in her future endeavours?
CEO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We've obviously provided an update to councillors in response to that letter. Our arrangement with the relevant department is that we have a contact there. We have all of our dealings through that particular contact in respect to the school. That's at their request. So we will be corresponding with the department, not with the school or with any particular member of that association.
Thank you. And finally, on the same weekly briefing report of the 13th of November, works on Cambridge Road and Percy Street, Belrive. On page 1, it says works were initially planned to be completed by the end of November 23. However, there have been minor delays to the work due to the discovery of poor ground conditions in Percy Street, etc. The work is currently on track to be completed by mid-December. My question is, have a number of the proprietors and businesses in Belrive Village been contacted? Because it's my understanding that they knew that, or they're under the understanding that works would be completed by the end of November, but now it seems as though that it'll be completed by mid-December. So have they, particularly those businesses that have been directly affected by this,
Councillor James, thank you.
will they be contacted and
Thank you
advised?
for your question. I can confirm that they have been, because I've actually engaged with a number of them in recent days. I've met with Ms Moore as well last week and got a good understanding as to that, the consultation piece. But Mr Graham, you might be in a more informed position to actually provide a more detailed answer.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor. Certainly all the businesses have been written to, and our council representatives have also door-knocked businesses down in the area to explain the reason for the extended completion date.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor James? No, thank you. Any other matters arising? All right, thank you, colleagues. I note we're at the end of our omnibus items. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Chong. A second, Councillor Warren. All those in favour? Thank you. We now move into item number 5, public question time. Public questions on notice. Mr Bradley Walker has 2 questions listed on the agenda. So we move on to 5.2. So are you able to provide answers to Mr Walker's questions, please?
Thank you. With your agreement, Mayor, Mr Graham is probably in a better position to respond to those.
All right. To make it, just so we understand, maybe if we... Will you read the question as well, Mr Graham? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Through Mr Mayor, so 2 questions. First question, at Council's meeting on the 30th of October 2023, I asked about the remaining walking tracks shown in Figure 3 in DPO 17 of SD 2011/30. That permit condition 9 states walking tracks must be constructed by the applicant prior to the sealing of public open space lots. Public open space lots have been handed over to Council several years ago, and these tracks are yet to be constructed. Is Council going to enforce this condition onto the applicant or construct these tracks themselves, as with Fairlie to Canoa track, with applicant contribution, and when will these tracks be completed? The answer is this is a large area where the development has been ongoing for well over a decade and involves a number of stages. A review of these stages, those in development and completed, is being undertaken in relation to the status of these tracks and trails. We are not in a position to advise on the specific timing of the Ropey Hills Tracks and Trails network at this stage. In 2024, Council officers plan to undertake a review of Council's Tracks and Trails strategy and Tracks and Trails action plan. This will assist in identifying priorities for track development, renewals and upgrades, including those in Ropey Hills area. Council and the community will be consulted with during this process. And the second question, is Council currently drafting a process to map dumped rubbish and or new comprehensive waste management policy and guidelines? If so, are land care groups involved with its development, and do Council have an estimated time for its implementation? The answer, Council officers implemented a new internal procedure for the monitoring and mapping of incidents related to dumped rubbish, which became operational on the 1st of July 2023. This is to provide data to understand the issues experienced in the municipality and guide Council's future management practices in this area. No external groups were involved in its development. A waste and resource recovery strategy is planned to be developed by Council officers in 2024. Feedback will be sought from Council, the community and stakeholders as part of its development.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Moving on to 5.3, answers to previous questions taken on notice, and I note that there's an additional response provided to Mr Walker's question of the 30th of October, and that's as listed in the agenda. Moving on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the public gallery tonight? Great. All right, we'll move on to that then. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item number 6, deputations by members of the public. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one deputation tonight from Mr Stuart Robertson in relation to the development application for 11 Alinga Street.
Good evening, Mr Robertson. Please come to the microphone, state your name and address, and please know that you are limited to 3 minutes, and a time will sound at the end of that time, and I will, in fairness to everyone, it'll be a hard stop at 3 minutes, but the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart Robertson, representing my father at 104 Tranmere Road, Harra, essentially in front of the proposed dwelling. Okay, just looking at 8.4.3 3, site coverage A1, the dwelling and site coverage not of more than 50%. Through my calculations, I calculated this at being 50.66%. Has this been independently verified by others? So I believe it is over the required 50%. Just a background, I am a surveyor, have been since 2000, so I do a bit of this work. All right, just moving on. So the next one is looking at the visual impact. So the tribunal from the Hollywood, Hobart and Tasmrat, just moving on from that, the scale, bulk and proportions of the proposal by considering the character and topography of the area. Okay, so I've had a look at the LiDAR data. I've assessed the height of the buildings in the area, and I've come up with the majority heights of the buildings in that area to be between 2.5 and 6.4 metres. The proposed dwelling is over the 7.5 regulation and is now sitting at 8.79, so quite considerably over that. So looking at that would actually, looking at that is to do with the topography, so that sort of means you need to look at the bulk of the property. And so looking at the bulk of the property as well, if you just have a look at a general map of the area, this is the proposed dwelling, and you can see that the scale of that dwelling is well above all the other houses in the area. So I think that actually needs to be assessed, and it hasn't been, and especially with regards to 104 Tramway Road, it hasn't. The impact on the view and the amenity of 104 hasn't been addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Yep.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our deputations. We now move into item number 7, Planning Authority matters, and Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item 7.1, which is a development application for 11 Linga Street, Howrah, dwelling and demolition. I call for a mover of the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do thank the deputator. I thank for the deputation that we received. I might say that some of those issues, particularly in relation to site coverage, which is an objective assessment, it's actually the officer's report says 49.6%, and yet we have, a professional expert who has told us that it's more than 50%. This is the sort of thing which is why we have an appeals process, and it's a bit hard for us as councillors to move an alternative motion when we don't have that objective evidence or a challenge to the assessment. So although I concede the points that have been raised, it's not something that we are in a position here to refuse on that basis, and really that is why we have an appeals process through TASCAT. The other area is the bulk and scale that was mentioned in the deputation, and that's been assessed by the officer's report based on some precedents in relation to the Hobart City Council, and once again that may be a subjective thing, but having been based on that, you would really have to find another precedent or a different interpretation of that precedent in order to make it. So although I appreciate the concerns, it is a fact that at all levels of government there's this push for increasing densification as somehow or other the solution to a housing crisis. I don't agree with that, but that is the planning scheme and those are the planning policies, and it's only going to get worse, in my view. In others' view, it'll be only going to get better. So on that basis, I think we're going to have to move with the officer's recommendation on this one and encourage the
the representatives to perhaps explore some professional advice before lodging an appeal.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Hunter.
I second pretty much everything Councillor Mulder said. It is enlightening to hear from the representative this evening, given their professional experience. Sounds like you might have a reasonable case to take to the tribunal, so I would encourage you to do so.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is interesting to note that probably for the first time we've had a professional address us in relation to a particular matter in relation to a development application in this place. It's unfortunate we only have heard from him tonight. There would have been, in my opinion, probably a better way to bring this matter forward, and that is to approach us individually so we could come and have a look at it and discuss it with him. Having said that, there are definitely some issues here that were alluded to by the representative on behalf of his father, and that is on page 20, the second paragraph, and I quote, "The dwelling has a maximum height of 8.792 metres. That is over the actual standard. For many years we were dealing with 7.5 under the old scheme, and then of course under the new provisions, which is now applicable in the statewide planning scheme, it's 8.5, and that has been one of the determining factors that really has sort of been part and parcel of any sort of refusal motion or recommendation for refusal coming forward. And I find it quite unusual that it has been identified as over 8.5 and it's 8.792, and that is by the very nature of it, it does not agree with the acceptable solutions, nor in fact for the performance criteria. And if you read through a number of the assessments, it talks about a lot of other issues, but it doesn't actually identify and say that the building has exceeded the height of 8.5. The other thing that is of concern is that on page 20, an amended set of plans was provided after completion of the advertising period, with the only change being windows 11 and 12 switched from standard size to highlight windows to meet the acceptable solution. The application, I'm quoting, "The application was not required to be re-advertised because the amended plans bring the proposal into conformity with the applicable solution." But the point I'm making here is that an amended set of plans was provided after the completion of the advertising period. So the advertising had closed, and therefore there was no opportunity, it would seem, for any of the two representatives to be able to be advised of that change in the windows being switched from standard size to highlight. So my question through you, Mr Mayor, to the planner is that this seems to be a rather unusual situation, and have the representatives, no, firstly, would this warrant a re-advertising of the DA, and B, that the representatives that have actually put in their representation would need to be advised before it would go any further as far as this being considered by council?
Thank you, Councillor James. Ms Olsen.
Through you, Mayor, the proposed windows, excuse me, sorry, the proposed windows are in fact smaller and bring them into more conformity with the planning scheme, and it now meets the acceptable solution. Therefore, there's no discretion. The representatives don't lose their opportunity to have a say through this proposal, and their representations are still relevant. So it has been done in accordance with recent tribunal decisions as well.
Thank you, Ms Olsen. Councillor James.
Yes, and furthermore, is it, would the planner advise council as to the maximum height of 8.792 metres? Is that a discretion that council can exercise, given that under the planning scheme there's a maximum height of 8.5?
Ms Olsen.
So through you, Mayor, the height is then, if it doesn't meet the acceptable solution, we then rely on the performance criteria which has been assessed within the report.
Thank you, Ms Olsen. Councillor James.
Yes, okay, thank you for that. It just seems unusual that we've had this basically locked in at 8.5 and now we seem to have a discretion for that, and that really is news to me. But nevertheless, if that's the professional viewpoint of the planner...
Councillor James, I'll just stop the clock please one moment. The CEO would like to make a comment here.
I think it's important just to clarify your line of inquiry. The height limit under the acceptable solution is a fixed amount, and as councillors will be aware, if you don't meet the acceptable solution standard, then you look to the performance criteria. And that's how this has been assessed. It's been assessed under the performance criteria. So at that point in time, the acceptable solution is no longer relevant.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor James, please restart the clock.
Thank you. I'd just like to refer council to page 24 of the officer's report. And in that, it's referring the performance criteria with regard to visual impacts caused by the apparent scale, bulk and proportions. And on page 24, it says, I quote, "However, this height increases to 8.792 metres as the site slopes down towards the rear of the site." It doesn't necessarily say anything more about exercising the discretion. It merely goes on and talks about distinct contrast in the finish of the exterior walls.
Thank you, Councillor James. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Thank you, Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I think there's a couple of points that are worth noting. So in terms of the height, that under the state planning provisions is incorporated into the use standard that deals with the building envelope and the acceptable solutions to the building envelope, including the height. So you then go to an assessment under the performance criteria. The deputation we received included, I understand, an argument that the building had a larger bulk than those, in the immediate area. I think it's important to note that the performance criteria in relation to visual impacts caused by apparent scale, bulk or proportions, it talks about the visual impacts. It doesn't talk about, as we've had assessed, for example, in density, consistency with the immediate area. So there's no question of consistency. It's a question of visual impact. And one of the things that the officers have noted in the report is the visual impact is minimised where, by the fact that some of the taller sections of the building are on the lower parts of it's a sloping site, and so the visual impact is reduced by that. But I also note that they do refer to in their arguments some relevant tribunal cases in coming to their assessment. I did want to put a question, if I may, Mr Mayor, about the issues in relation to site coverage and whether, sorry, I've forgotten the gentleman's name who made the deputation, but whether that information had been provided to planning officers prior to their assessment, and if so, what accounts for the discrepancy between their assessment and the gentleman who made the deputation.
So Mr Robertson's made the deputation.
Thank you.
Ms Olsen?
I'm sorry, I'd have to take that on notice. Yep.
All right. Councillor Hume,
Okay. So we're not sure whether we have that information. So I guess it's a matter of. I expect then that one of two things has happened. Either Mr. Robinson has provided that information, and the planning officers have still stuck by their assessment, or the information wasn't provided at the time the report was prepared. So either way, I'm going to have to trust that the planning officers have got that assessment correct, and of course, if that's not the case, then that's something that, as my colleagues before have said, could be explored further in the tribunal.
thank you, Councillor Hume.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Moulder, right of reply, please.
No, except to say that these are all good points, and it puts a difficulty in as we are starting here trying to administer a planning scheme. And it's time to reiterate my long often claim is that we are here as the front for a state government policy signed off by the Minister, administered under an act of the State Parliament, and we have very, very little discretion to overturn the advice as is concerned. And although there are times when there are subjective criteria that we can come up with a different interpretation, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And I do encourage the people who made the deputation to perhaps stay for the debate on the development assessment panels, because they'll find there's some interesting contributions to be made there as to what the role of councils is now and what it's likely to be when the state government takes even that little bit of discretion away from us.
Well, thank you, Councillor Moulder. Thank you, colleagues. I'll now put the motion, which is the recommendation, that is that the 11 Lingus Street, Howard dwelling and demolition development application be approved, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Council now concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. We move on to item 8.2 being asset management. First one being 8.2.1, Richmond Village Master Plan Community Consultation. I'll call for a mover, Councillor Chong, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I start by commending the consultation that was done earlier this year that gave rise to this master plan? It was really excellent and engaged community in lots of different ways so that people had a really good chance to get their issues out. There are certainly some challenging suggestions in this master plan. There will be some collective apoplexy when people see it, but I think it's really important that we get those suggestions out and people have a chance to have a look at them and come up with what they think. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes back from this consultation. I did note there's no time frame in this recommendation, and I would hope, given that it's coming up to the school holidays and Christmas and all of those kind of things, that it is a reasonably long period of consultation, because there will be a lot of people away. But generally speaking, I commend it to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor. I can assure you that it is an extensive period of time. Ms Wicks, maybe you could enlighten us, please, as to how long exactly.
Through you, Mayor. I believe they're looking at around 2 months, just to give that time over school holidays in the summer period.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Goyne, as seconder, thank you.
Just to further from what Councillor Chong said, obviously, as we're all aware, community consultation is the key and something that we've all pushed very hard. I commend everybody for coming up with the master plan as it stands, and I look forward to hearing the community and what they have to say about our lovely little village. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Thank you, Mr Robertson. Colleagues, anyone else wish to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, thank you.
I don't endorse the actual plan, but I endorse going out. I have substantial concerns about absolutely fabulous and stupendous levels of expectation that it might build up as far as what's listed in there. And I think that can be a real rod for council's back, and can potentially, the perfect can be the enemy of the possible sometimes. So not that I'm inferring that it's perfect, but just that it's capital A ambitious. That said, I'm happy for it to go out to the next stage, and then I guess the real rubber on the road is the decision we make once we get all the feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Just in the weekly briefing, I was watching the recording earlier today, and Councillor Chong had asked a question about whether prioritisation will be part of the consultation for the next steps or for the implementation plan. And I couldn't quite hear whether there was a response given to that. I'm just looking for an answer.
There certainly was a response. Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, speaking to council officers today, yes, there will definitely be a question in relation to that.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Any other colleagues wishing to? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I endorse the. I don't endorse the plan, of course. That's not what it's about. It's about consultation, and there are a number of things that we have to do before we get to the point where we do endorse it. And of course, the consultation is the important thing. My little pet in all of this, and it's lots of nice things, and there will need to be specific prioritisations because some things are more urgent than others, and we can't get it all done in the next week or two. The village has been around for a little while, so I guess it'll be around for a little while longer, but there are some priority issues, but those really are matters for council, for the consultation. Speaking of which, I'm a bit concerned that 2 months is considered an extensive consultation period, given the fact that the 2 months, if it starts from today, puts us in the middle of January. I mean, we all know the world really doesn't start up until about February, and lots of people are away during January and all those sorts of things. So can I perhaps suggest it ought to be 3 months to get over that, because that's how often do we get criticised, or the state government in particular? You know, like you'll see major consultation things announced in early December, you know, when everyone's switched off about what the future plans of the government might be. So that's set aside. My pet hate in this thing, not in the report, but my particular issue with Richmond is my concern over the Heritage Bridge. Now, the bridge is apparently the oldest continuing bridge in Tasmania, which in Australia, which I thank Councillor Chong for bringing to my attention, except I was at the Elizabeth River at Campbelltown, and I'll show you a plaque of a picture that claims that is the oldest continuing heritage bridge in Tasmania, in Australia. The issue with the bridge is that, and it's picked up in the initial consultation, 62.7% of people were concerned about heavy vehicles' use of Bridge Street, which is part of the bridge. And nearly 60% are also concerned about the rat run, of the volume of traffic going through there. Now, that may have come off a little bit since the highway works, but I can tell you from my experience and my knowledge of the people at Sorrel, there are many people that have used this historic village as a rat run over the old cobblestones to get to either the Bowen Bridge or to the East Derwent Highway, and thereby bypassing the congestion that is on the Tasman Highway going to the bridge. So that rat run continues. And this council, on a motion that I put forward some years ago, has placed the bypassing on the eastern side, linking Brinktop through Prosses and onto the heavy link vehicle road up to Coal River, as a council priority. When we asked what progress there was on that, the Minister for Infrastructure wrote back to us and said, this is a priority when we will wait the outcome of the master plan. That master plan contains what I think is, and this is no reflection on those who dreamt it up, but an idea of some traffic lights on one side of the bridge, which would make it virtually impossible for parents exiting that primary school to go to the west side of Richmond to bring their children home. And the reason they can't do that is because there is no bypass from Brinktop through Prosses up to the Coal River Link Road. So I think as a result of this master plan, we need to write back to the Minister and say, you know, this is a problem, and this is a problem highlighted in this master plan, and although that bypass road is outside the area of the master plan, this master plan is obviously driving the need for there to be an alternative egress from St John's Primary School. So, you know, I think it's already good. Yes, it is a grandiose master plan. That's what master plans are. And also it's subject to change as time goes by. I mean, a master plan is an idea, and I was most interested that when we were having the workshop on this, that there was continual references to the rendering of these pictures and the rendering. Well, I thought rendering was something you put on the side of a brick wall, but apparently there are other uses of the word rendering. But no, I think it's a really good start. I think the consultation will be fairly appropriate because it's obviously we're consulting the community back on their own ideas, if you like. So I would expect.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. And colleagues, I'm going to jump into the debate now as a councillor and just say that as is contained within our report, the consultation promotion plan, draft Richmond Village Master Plan is set out there. Anticipated start date being the 27th of November, which of course is a week today. Anticipated end date to be the 4th of February, which is 9 weeks. I'm going to suggest that we push it out for 12 weeks to the 25th of February. Ms Weeks, is that doable from your perspective? Excellent. So that then coincides obviously with the commencement of our bicentennial celebrations. Goes all the way through Christmas, into school holidays, and then out to the end of February. So a 12-week consultation period is of course 3 times more than our usual 4 weeks. And if colleagues are happy with that, we'll make that change so to ensure that everyone has every opportunity to participate. Can I just also lend my support and thanks to the staff for what I think is a fantastic and very visionary master plan, and I thoroughly enjoyed that briefing that we received a few weeks ago now. So thank you, colleagues. Councillor James, you know I'm able to participate in debate. I haven't moved or seconded a motion.
No, I was just asking whether you want consent of the rest of the council.
I was getting to that, Councillor James.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But thank you for reminding me. Colleagues, are you happy with that change to go from 9 to extend by another 3 weeks to 12 weeks through to the 25th of February? Does anyone disagree with that? Okay. Can we take that then as... Thank you, Ms Wicks. Thank you. All right. Councillor Jones, do you now like to contribute to the debate?
No.
Okay, Councillor Hume?
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to contribute at all? Councillor Chong, a reply, please.
Just very briefly, thank my colleagues for their comments, and I'm sure Councillor Mulder will be very happy to know that one of the things that came up quite considerably when we've discussed this in Richmond is that second bypass, and the traffic lights were equally considered to be a radical step. So it will be interesting to see what comes back from the consultation. I think my colleagues support.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Colleagues, I'll put the motion, this recommendation, with an amendment, of course, and that is that, and I realise it's a bit clumsy and I apologise for that, but Part B read that authorise the Chief Executive Officer to coordinate community consultation to obtain feedback on the draft master plan and to report the consultation outcomes to a future council meeting, noting that the consultation period increases through to the 25th of February. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Chong?
Certainly.
Councillor Goyne? Thank you. All right. That now becomes the motion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4, being governance. The quarterly report to 30th of September 2023 has been circulated. I'll ask for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy, and secondly, Councillor Chong. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Other than to commend the report.
Thank you, Councillor Chong.
Ditto. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, Councillor James did beat you then, Councillor Warren, but Councillor James, do you have the call?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. On page 8 of the quarterly report, homelessness and housing, it refers to the Clarence Cricket Club to deliver weekly showers for people in need, which is commendable. Is that a sort of an ongoing matter, or is it sort of a one-off account?
Thank you, Councillor James. Ms Coburn.
Mr Mayor, yes, it is an ongoing program of activity that we brokered with Orange Sky Laundry and some other service providers, so it's an ongoing program.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. That's, the other one is in relation to page 12, and it refers to the Kangaroo Bay Wharf site. And it says, in its decision of the 23rd of January, was to authorise the Chief Executive Officer to initiate the buyback land from Shambroad. Is the CFO in a position to advise where we're at with that, or has it still in the mediation process?
CEO, please.
Thank you. Obviously, much of this is confidential, but I can advise that we have had mediation, but we haven't finalised that as yet.
And finally,
James.
on page, let's have a look at page 94, it refers to the council chambers redevelopment, of which a budget amount of 1.329 million was approved by this council early this year. My question that to date 148,098 has been expended to September 2023. Is that intended to be exhausted either for the rest of the financial year, or is it it will come in within budget, please?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, please, or Ms Murrell, it's your choice.
Thank you. I can answer that. Through you, Mayor. In accordance with the update that we provided to councillors a couple of weeks ago, that's an ongoing project. The project funds are to get us to DA stage, but at this point in time we are at the early feasibility stage. So it will span more than, well, we are hoping to be substantially progressed in the first half of next year, but that will be an issue for council to review and authorise further work at that point.
Is it intended to lodge a DA within the next 12 months?
Yes, subject to council's agreement to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Mulder, thank you. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Sorry, Councillor, I did it twice, and I'm sure I won't forget it.
Try not to take that personally. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question on page 59 of the quarterly report. Under an environmentally responsible city, I note that the activity to evaluate the tree canopy cover in Clarence and prepare an urban tree strategy is on hold, and under status it says that that project has been deferred. Could I have an update on that, because I have had a number of people ask me when we're going to have a tree strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, at the moment that project's on hold for resourcing issues that we're trying to manage such a big program in terms of bushfire management strategy, the natural asset strategies and so many other strategies at the moment. We are and certainly reviewing our resourcing to advise councils when we can feel that we're in the position to proceed forward with that item.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The quarterly report is noted. I've got just a particular bee in my bonnet about the financials, and I say, you know, they're on track and everything's going okay. But I just have some warnings and some concerns. Both federal and state governments reviews on their infrastructure projects in particular and other major projects as supply and demand and inflation, international crises are blowing out costs of projects across the board, and there's not one of them that isn't engaged in a review. Now, federal has a surplus. Federal managed to do a surplus because they have a revenue stream. Inflation actually increases tax receipts, and the commodity prices and the international crises are all feeding in to what is basically a windfall for the government at the expense of the cost of living of the rest of us. In Tasmania, we are likely to follow Queensland's suit and find ourselves with an energy windfall because our cost of production is so much less than the price that we pay due to the fact that we're in the energy market. Another warning is the local government review talked, and the government had ruled out forced amalgamations. At the same time, reading the tea leaves, and it's become quite common, the government is keen to do something about the grants and subsidies, especially to small, viable councils. So if you're not going to have compulsory amalgamations, and you cut the grants and subsidies to these small and viable councils, I would suggest that the subsequent insolvency is not a forced amalgamation, it's a voluntary one, as if. Now, Clarence can survive all this because we are a large and thing, but we are budgeting for this year for a $3 million surplus, but of the revenue streams, there's around $7.6 million in grants and subsidies. If they were to be withdrawn in the current environment, we would actually have a deficit of $4 million. And that's before we begin our debt-fuelled aspirational project spend. Now, people will say that, yes, we should be borrowing money and for these things because the intergenerational debt is for intergenerational assets. But without a quick income stream other than rates and the impact that has on our ratepayers, who are already exacerbated by cost of living increases, we can borrow money to build intergenerational assets. But when the next generation has to build those assets, they can't afford to borrow any money, or if they do, you end up into a debt cycle that perpetuates itself. There are no windfalls in council rates. We just have to go and increase our rates to either pay the debt or pay for these projects. So as we head into the next budget cycle after the Christmas and January break, I think that we need to do a serious rethink and some crystal ball gazing and rethink some of our aspirational projects, and certainly take a very conservative approach to introducing any more than is needed to do, because there are stormy times ahead in terms of revenue for the local government level, and no silver bullet that's going to come and rescue us, like the cost of living. So read the tea leaves or revisit our big aspirational things. But apart from that, I can compliment the council and the staff on being on track with most of our projects and with most of our projects, noting that the big spends are all going to occur next year, not this year. So we'll look forward to trying to work out how we're going to do that. And what we need to do is keep in mind commitments made prior to the last election. Lowest possible rates, and that does not include aspirational projects.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure about that exact platform being adopted by council as such. I think some would suggest a value-based approach. My question is in relation to 41, and that's to do with the construction of the senior exercise equipment demo site at Simmons Park. It's listed here that the quotation process, that you're finalising the quotation process. Are there expectations that this will be completed this financial year?
Thank you. Mr. Graham?
Mr. Mayor, I'll have to take that one on notice and I'll provide an update to councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Councillor Walker?
No, just again, these reports are very helpful for the community and councillors alike. Not all councils do them, and I support us continuing on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate the officers on another great quarterly report, and I'm actually very pleased with the format of the report and how informative it is in terms of showing us, the progress we're making on various projects, and also how that links to our strategic objectives, which I think is really important. Is what we're doing operational actually follows our strategies. I wasn't actually going to speak on this, but I felt compelled by Councillor Moulder's contribution. I'm sorry he's not here to hear what I have to say, but yes, there are a lot of aspirations in terms of our future projects. I do take issue with the argument that if we're going to cover expenses, the only lever we have to pull is raising rates. The other lever we have to pull is economic development, which is the potential to increase our rates base to increase the number of commercial rateable properties, and also when we look at certain projects, certain initiatives like the Kangaroo Bay Wharf site, where we've had the opportunity to have a whole lot of private money contribute to the economy in that area, and instead we've gone for a decision that has an uncertain outcome and the possibility that to get anything moving there we may actually need to spend ratepayers' money. That's certainly another lever we can pull in terms of making sure we reduce expenses and increase our revenue. So there are other options, there are other opportunities, and economic development is one of the ways that we can provide growth in our rate space and the best infrastructure and the best services for our residents and ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor Hugh. Any other colleagues wishing to speak on this matter? Councillor Kennedy. Right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. We'll put the motion then, that is that we accept the quarterly report to 30th of September 2023. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.2, which is Development Assessment Panel Framework Position Paper Submission. There's a recommendation. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy.
Just happy to support the recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunter.
Not everyone, all of our colleagues here might agree on this submission. I actually think it's quite sound and reasonable. I will be supporting it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to make? Councillor James, thank you.
Yes, look, it's very interesting to hear from the mover and seconder, in particular, in relation to what is a substantial change to the way the planning authority would operate, as far as if this gets up within the state government's process. It is interesting to note that I think the way that the motion is worded, it endorses the submission to the State Planning Office as feedback on the Development Assessment Panel, as feedback. Now, in the attachment, it goes to great lengths to actually state, and I'm quoting on the last page, the objectives of planning are fundamental to the existing planning framework and should be continue to be. From that perspective, the Council's summary position is this, and this motion actually endorses this attachment that's going to go to the State Planning Office, that the proposed DAP should be limited to a specific range of development application types only. Referral of an application to the DAP should be at the discretion of the planning authority. Referral to the DAP should only occur at the decision-making phase. The DAP process should be based on the existing development assessment process and timelines and should not extend it to the planning scheme amendment process. there should be no changes to the minister's powers to initiate a planning scheme amendment. That is what is incorporated within the attachment. So by reading that as the basic summary or what the objectives of planning are, and this is this council's viewpoint, then we are saying ipso facto that the proposed DAP should be adopted, but within certain guidelines. But that I thought was something that we all went into the election last year maintaining, and I'm presuming most of the candidates that, and I can't necessarily speak for them because none of them are not here, but those that were elected, I believe that they had wanted to maintain the planning authority as it is, and therefore there was that opportunity, if there was a conflict of interest or appeared to be a conflict of interest with either the staff or an elected representative, then there is another way of doing that, rather than referring it to the DAP. And that is obviously, as we did with a development application a couple of years ago, where we got an independent planner in to do the assessment, and by the very nature of having that independent planner brought on board, for all intents and purposes, then I think the majority of the councillors at that time were happy or were supportive of the recommendation that came forward. So that is a means that has been used, and I believe effectively, and that is one of the key proposals that's been incorporated within the officer's report. And I quote, "Contentious applications where councillors may wish to act as elected representatives supporting the views of their constituents might be at odds with their role as a member of the planning authority." And the comments and response, which is in the officer's report, the planning authority should refer to a potential DAP. So again, we've got the DAP. The DAP is going to be what this council believes is an appropriate tool, and that is also been summarised, as I've just mentioned, as part of limited to development application, specific range of development applications, and referral of the DAP should occur at the decision-making phase. So again, that's taking away from this council, or any councils for that matter, their role as the planning authority. And I don't think that's really where we want to go. It seems as though that we have wanted to stand out in the process, and if the government wants to adopt what some of these other councils on the mainland have instigated,
thank you,
then I
Councillor
think it's
Jones.
right.
Any other colleagues? Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to try and summarise this in plain English. My understanding is that the proposal by the government for a development assessment panel, which my colleague refers to as a DAP, is to take on much of the work that is currently done by councils acting as a planning authority. I'm absolutely committed to planning decisions being made locally by people who know the area. Our planning scheme already favours developers over residents, and I think that this is a step in the wrong direction. So there are a number of proposals included in what this development assessment panel might do. Our officer's report responds to each one of those and says in most cases this is unnecessary and not workable and is better done locally. There are a couple of minor instances where conflict of interest might be better dealt with by an external body, the Development Assessment Panel, but in general our officers are saying this is not a good idea and we don't support it, and therefore I'm happy to support this recommendation which endorses sending that submission to the government. Whether or not they'll take any notice of us or not, me being very cynical, I suspect it's kind of a moot point, but I will support that we make this submission.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Chong, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess for me, this position paper that came from the government covers a whole range of things which we never contemplated when we looked at changes to the planning scheme and how things might work previously. So for me, this submission brings together each of those items and clinically, almost, goes through why many of them are not a particularly good idea. To take Councillor Warren's comments, you know, planning should be done by the people for whom it impacts, not some commission up there, DAP up there, that perhaps doesn't know about what's going on. So for us, I think it's really important that we do endorse this submission, that we make representations to the government about why we don't think most of the suggestions in their position paper are valid, but also that we put some other things in there. I do think it's important, if we get ourselves into a conflict of interest position, it's really useful to have somewhere that we can send that to. We were all very uncomfortable last year when we had to assess an application for somebody in this chamber. Whether we made the right decision or not is a moot point at this stage, but we were all very uncomfortable about having to do it. And I think the suggestion that something like a DAP would actually give us the capacity to send that to somebody not engaged with it makes great sense. I think, as all of us, we should endorse this submission.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If you want to know what the government's really going to do, simply have a look at the July 23 press release of the Premier when announcing these DAP programs, and he simply said that there's too much political interference, we're going to take the politics out of planning, and we're going to introduce DAP panels, and one of the reasons is for developers who don't think they're going to get a fair hearing from their local council. Sorry, what are we discussing? That's what they're going to do. That's what they want to do. And it's all in the context of some of the plans that we've seen around. It's in the context of things like Skylands. It's in the context of the Mac Point Stadium. They're the concepts. And the thing is that we could, you know, I mean, Burnie's already gone down this path. They delegate all their planning matters to the planning staff. They don't have they don't sit as a planning authority. They delegate the lot. And to me, apart from the tweaking that we do from time to time, apart from getting in here, giving some advice to representatives or to development, you know, people who are in the chamber or are watching the debate, we're really powerless, except in the most marginal of areas, of subjective areas, and then those areas are appealed and it goes to TASCAT anyway. So, you know, I mean, and then the idea that contentious applications where councillors may wish to act as elected representatives supporting the views of their constituents, which might be at odds with their role as a member of a planning authority, might. It is. The Local Government Act makes it absolutely clear that we are there to administer the planning scheme. What's this might nonsense? And that's what it is, it's nonsense. This is from people who are grappling for excuses to say, we want to take the people out of planning. And we'll disguise it as taking the politics out of planning. So that's what the thing is. Look, I endorse the movement. I simply wonder why the government didn't just bite the bullet and go for the reform number one, which was remove council's responsibility for determining development applications. Instead, they've given councils a framework for the referral of development applications to an independent panel for determination. Councils the power to defer? That's a little odd with the Premier's press release. He's simply saying give the developers the option, and that's what the paper discusses as well. So, you know, it's just one of these mishmash things. We'll go out there and but we don't want to take it all away from them. We still want to be able to hide when our policies don't quite get the community acceptance that we want. We still want to hide behind the council to say, sorry, council made that decision, when in fact all we were doing was enforcing their planning policies. So I'm a little bit sick of being the scapegoat and all of these things. You know, I do enjoy the debate sometimes. We've got an occasional one or two up, but normally because there's no representatives, so there can be no appellants, even though, you know, the scheme isn't required that way. But I endorse the remark, but I just look forward to the government cherry picking who it gives a free kick to, and who it's going to put through the normal planning process and put us through. But anyway, that's my contribution.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Moulder's scepticism is warranted, I believe, particularly because the Premier, in putting this forward, hasn't actually given any examples of what the planning decisions were, where the politics was in them. So when they talk about taking the politics out of planning, I'd really like to see some examples. It seems to me that a lot of this is a solution looking for a problem and a power grab by the state government. Having said that, I'm actually very pleased with the response that the CEO has drafted. I think he's done an excellent job. It is, right to observe that there are situations where conflicts of interest could arise. I think just in addressing the points that Councillor James raised, it's important to draw a distinction between the situations where the council planning officers may have a conflict of interest and where council laws may have a conflict of interest. Referring the planning assessment to an independent expert planner outside of the council addresses the former, but it doesn't really address the latter, because under the current legislation, the ultimate decision still comes back to the council for decision. And so one of the DAPs could potentially have a use, and that use is in some limited circumstances, and one of those circumstances is where the majority of councillors may have a conflict of interest, and therefore council can't really make an independent judgment. I think it's also worth noting that there are a number of consultation issues here, not just the question of the DAPs and the matters in which circumstances in which matters may be referred to them. And our response to consultation issue 2 is certainly important. I don't believe it would be a good outcome if we had the Minister able to direct councils to initiate planning scheme amendments. I think that power should still stay with councils, so that we have some control over local provisions. So I'm very happy to endorse the submission. Thank you.
Councillor Hume. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Look, a few issues have been brought up tonight. One of them is in relation to dealing with matters concerning other councillors. It's on the video, so I hope I'm not misrepresenting my position at the time, but from recollection, when there are matters that have some, if you like, contentious things around them, the reason why I wanted the matter investigated was to be able to say, we've been through the process and the best practice result is X or Y. And what I'd hoped that would come from that is that even if it was continuing of the same process, that we could show to members of the community that might have some concern, here's what we did, here's how it got to, and that's why it's still either handled here or now it's put to somewhere else. What can I say about this matter? I compliment the General Manager. It's a considered response. So I think that people shouldn't have concerns around that. However, don't think. I think there's cause for reflection around this chamber, and 28 other councils might want to ask Clarence some questions, because the fact of the matter is, and when did this come about? It followed a decision that this council made in March. Now, was that the absolute stimulus for a reconsideration of how planning matters are dealt with? Probably not. But, as far as straws go on the back of a camel, I consider the decision of March to be a gargantuan bariatric straw of epic proportions that broke that camel's back. So I'm not supporting this, because this, I think this is a mess a bit of this council's making, and I think the initiators of that can, move it forward to see how it goes. stepping to the side when looking at planning as a whole. I think it is correct for councils to have planning departments. I much prefer that than the idea of the omni-planning corporation in the middle of town, hosted by planning bureaucrats that don't actually live or work in the communities that would be affected. I think day to day that isn't going to lead to as good outcomes, because at a local level there's a lot of unforeseen consequences that can be identified and often remedied. Sometimes it can't be, but at least it's brought to the fore as matters for consideration. So we are where we are, and how did we get here?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Goyne or Councillor Tarko, would either one of you like to participate? Okay. Councillor Kennedy, your vote reply, please.
Yes, just thanks to colleagues for their varied comments around the table. Thanks to the General Manager for asking us for our feedback over the last week or so, and to those people around the table that picked up the phone, had a bit of a chat about it, and were happy to support where we've landed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Colleagues, I'll now put the motion as a recommendation, which is 8.4.2, Development Assessment Panel Framework Position Paper Submission. All those in favour? Against? And abstaining. Thank you very much. It's so carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8.4.3, which is Tasmania Fire and Emergency Services Bill submission. I'll call for a mover of this recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor Chong, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Chong, please.
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, I think notwithstanding the recent commentary about things going back to the drawing board, I think it's very important that we do provide a submission in response to the items that were listed previously, some of which will cause us a lot of problems.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goyne. Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, please.
Yeah. Again, consultation is, well, submissions were invited, submissions been made. Against the points in the submissions, I think, again, good responses. What is absent, I think, is just the absolute urgency to massively, not massive, what is missing from this is the urgency to really focus the efforts on the new resources that are required. That's the whole, if you like, the impetus around these changes. Now, the local government community has been quite forthright, along with other sectors, in saying, here are shortfalls, and there's been some equivocation and some general nodding to say, yeah, we understand we need, it's something that needs addressing with increased resources. This is something I think we should be incredibly proactive in and muscular in not just stating, but actually problem solving. And it might actually be that through administrative elegance, it is going to be council's mechanisms that are the way that that the resourcing is collected, and we can have a long debate about the fractional way and the fair way to do it. But I think we really should be saying that it needs to be done, because we are in many areas, we're a peri-urban, peri-suburban community, with the interface between residential and bushland is more dramatic, I think, in this council than other ones. And I have great concerns around the summer that's coming up. And I note previous council attempt to declare a climate emergency. That wasn't something that I supported, but I did support practical and tangible steps. And if you like it, this is an area where the mitigation and the adaptation is so crucial. And I think that our sector, in getting our noses out of joint with what was put forward, and perhaps could have been put forward better, has caused some distraction around that. This is such a critical issue, and I'd rather take a few blows to the chin for local government to be helping and getting this process sorted than the alternative, because it really, when it comes to bushfires, or resourcing for firefighting, an ounce of prevention is worth, not just a pound of cure, it's worth a tonne of cure. And the sector as a whole, I don't think, is embracing the urgency in this space.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
I won't be supporting this particular submission because I think, and the reason is summed up actually in the submission in the submission itself, and I refer to the general comment. As the fire service levy is simply a government-based tax, this should be raised by the state government. They do have a state taxation office, by the way, and not imposed on councils to undertake. The council currently receives 4% of the funds collected on a commission. How conscious was that one level of government acting as a tax collector for another level of government, whilst that level of government hides behind in the rates notice and simply, and we have fought assiduously to try to separate the fire levy out, over which we have no control, but it's lumped on. It looks like the council is raising these taxes. So to submit anything other than go away and raise your own taxes, don't use us as the tax collectors, anything else is beyond that. And the risk we have of putting these submissions in is that we are perpetuating the idea that somehow or other we are the collectors of these taxes. Now, we know that's not true. We simply should leave it within saying, I'm sorry, as the general comment says, collect your own taxes and we're the opprobrium for doing so. And that's what we see time and time again. We just saw it in the discussion with the planning authority matters, and now we're seeing it with the fire service levy matters. They go and hide behind the councils to make it look like we're the ones because we're collecting it through our rates. And we do all this stuff to try to separate them out, but no, when they get their rates, be like, oh, this is terrible, why have my rates gone up? And it takes a bit of time to pare through and say the fire service levy's gone up dramatically, but your rates haven't. And that's the thing. So I can't support this. I think the councils, the councils should have simply butted out and allowed the people, the property owners, to deal with the state government straight up and down. And I don't think we should be commenting at all.
Councillor Hume, please. Excuse me.
I'm going to have to disagree with my colleague, Councillor Mulder, in that yes, the general comment is pertinent. It is a state government levy and therefore should be collected by the state government, and the Clarence Council and other councils should not wear the opprobrium for increases in this levy when essentially we don't have control over it. But having said that, while the current arrangements are in place, not just as advocates for our communities, but also given that those arrangements are in place, it is fair and reasonable for us to make comment in terms of how the levy is structured. So I believe it's important to have both parts of the response in there. Having said that, something else I would add as a comment, although I'm not necessarily advocating for it to go in the response. The response is great as is. But I also question whether we really should have a fire service levy. And I take Councillor Walker's comments about the need to, particularly in the midst of the huge risks posed by bushfire and climate change, to have a well-resourced fire service. But is that the best model for doing it, rather than something that maybe a bit more progressive, such as a commensurate increase in land tax? There's all these... part of the problem with state taxes is you've got all these bits and pieces added together, and I just think that there may be a tidier way to do it. But happy to endorse the response. It is certainly ridiculous that the Tasmanian government puts forward a model that leads to potentially over 1,000% increases in this levy. That's just completely unreasonable. So I support the response.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And I think that Councillor Hume has missed the whole point of this debate, because quite clearly it says that as the fire levy is simply a government-based tax, this should be raised by the state government and not imposed on councils to undertake. And that is the fact of the matter. It's strictly a state government tax. We have a land tax, which is administered by the State Revenue Office or the State Taxation Office, if you want to use that term. And therefore, why should we be the sort of bunny in the middle, so as to speak, where we're simply going ahead and receiving 4% of the funds collected? And it's already been acknowledged, Councillor Hume, that this amount needs to go towards administration tasks involved in raising and collecting the levy. So council would, by all means of other, be sort of out of pocket when it comes for a minuscule amount of 4% of a particular levy, which by all intents and purposes is the province of the state government, and therefore it shouldn't be imposed upon us and us having to carry the can as far as having to explain why it's the case that it appears on our rate notice. So, Councillor Hume, you've missed the point there. The total fire revenue...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hume.
I think I'm being misrepresented. I actually agree with Councillor James's point. I just said that it's important to make the other point in terms of how the levy is structured given the current arrangements. So we are actually in agreement on including the point in the consultation about how the levy should be collected.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, again, the council is currently carrying over $250,000 of fire levy debt. That's on our books. That has to be administered, and I would have thought that the State Revenue Office, if it has been given that responsibility to raise this, and it would seem to me to be a straightforward proposal for that department within the State Treasury, which I think it aligns itself with the State Treasury, to be able to administer the fire levy debt, and that obviously would entail, rather than council having to follow up on the state government's behalf to recoup that money, and presumably the 4% isn't substantial enough to be able to cover the administrative costs that this council has had to incur. So look, I will not be supporting this. I think it's really not addressing the issue. I may be bold enough to say that years ago we had an ambulance levy. It didn't last very long. It caused almost a certain concern in the community, and I understand at the time that may have been administered by the State Revenue Office or as part of the State Taxation Office, as we call it, and therefore that probably for more political and backlash from the community, that was subsequently carried into the Department of Health as part of its administrative costs, as ongoing costs in the health budget. So look, we need to make it clear to the government that we should cease to be part of this collection agency for the state government, and the sooner that happens the better, and therefore by making this comment that we are submitting this recommendation to the department that endorses the submission in the report, and therefore we're seeking feedback, and it basically cuts across everything I think we need to be able to say, and in these circumstances I will not support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor James. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Warren. Thank you. Then Councillor Darko.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Walker for refocusing our attention on the fact that this is about raising sufficient funds to protect us in a fairly volatile climate at the moment, and a strong likelihood of bushfires. So the money does need to be raised somehow. If it's not raised through a tax, then it requires to be taken away from some other service that's already provided. So, we need to recognise that there is a cost to providing this service. Should it be equally borne by the community? Should it be borne by the people who choose to live in areas of greatest risk? Those are all things to be discussed. But if there is going to be revenue raised via a tax, as it is at the moment, I can't think of any other tax that I get from the government on a yearly basis People have mentioned land tax. I don't pay land tax. Is that because I only own one property? So what mechanism could the government possibly use for getting a bill to every landowner, every householder in a year, in 4 easy payments? I don't know, maybe rates. It seems to be that the system is already set up where we get a commission for doing it. It may not be enough, but if the government had to set up an entirely new system to administer that tax, that would be less revenue that they would be raising. So I don't have an issue with this.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Darko.
Thank you. Yeah, just noting, as pointed out initially by Councillor Mulder, that the attachment does actually state, as the fire levy is simply a government-based tax, this should be raised by the state government. So that is actually in the attachment. But I'd just like to acknowledge that as Councillor Walker raised the issue of climate change, we have a state government that has not ceased old-growth logging, and we know that increased tree coverage leads to increased rainfall, leads to reduced dryness, leads to reduced bushfires. Clarence Council does have a policy of increasing tree coverage. The state government, meanwhile, is subsidising a loss-leading industry. So I think that we do need a state government acting more to protect Tasmanians and hopefully reduce the burden of work on firefighters through policies such as that, and also reduce the amount it would need to raise in Clarence.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Councillor Hunter or Councillor Kennedy, would you wish to? Okay, wonderful. Councillor Chong, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I don't think any of us would argue that we should support a well-resourced, funded fire and emergency services. You know, we all recognise the value, and we hope we never have to use either of them, but we definitely understand that they are really important to our society. Currently collected, this particular levy, currently collected through council as a major part, but also through the insurance levy, and trust me, I've just got my insurance bills. I know how much the fire levy was on there. It wasn't cheap. And also through the motor vehicle levy. So we're not the only place that this is collected. But I guess what this submission for me is about is ensuring that the system is transparent, that we understand what's included, how it's calculated, and who potentially doesn't pay, which is one of the comments that comes out in the submission, that some schools, charities, government buildings perhaps don't pay the fire levy under the proposed situation. Now, realistically, same fire engines would be going to them if they have a fire than go to everybody else. So I don't see why they shouldn't contribute too. This submission picks up a number of those issues, and I think it's very important that we support them and get our views known to the state government. I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. So item 8.4.3, the motion is the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 9. There are no motions on notice. There are no questions on notice. Moving on to item number 10.3, answers to questions without notice previous council meeting. That's as listed in the agenda. So questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor starting this evening with Councillor Mulder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. The first one relates to the Clarence City Council's road priorities, which I mentioned previously, which are now several years old. The quarterly report in regards to our road priorities refers us to the Hobart City Deal website. I looked at what I believe to be the latest report there, and there is not one Clarence Council road in the report, nor was there one Clarence Council road in the last state government budget. Could you advise us, Mr. Mayor, how the Clarence City Council road priorities are progressing?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Mr. Graham, please.
Best to take that one notice so I can provide all councillors with a detailed answer, because I know it was a number of years when that priorities list was done, but some of them are progressing in terms of continual inquiries with the state government, such as the Mornington Road roundabout and things.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Your second question, Councillor Mulder.
continuing inquiries progress. The second one report is neither does the quarterly report make any mention of the Begonia Street ceiling. So I haven't been there for a while and I assume it hasn't happened yet. Can you advise as to the progress and why it's absent? I might have missed it, but it doesn't seem to be in any of the road projects in the report, yet it is a major push for this council.
Thank you, Councillor Muller. Mr Graham?
It certainly should be in there, and I can do a double check on that. The design is progressing on terms of sealing the road, and again, I'll provide an update to councillors on that specific project.
Mentions of the dig-out programs and the resealing programs, and this one isn't there.
Thank you, Mr Graham. We'll come back to that one, Councillor Muller. Thank you. Good question. I can also, Councillor James is nodding as well. It hasn't been sealed, at least in the last 24 hours. So, Councillor Hunter.
This is in relation to organisational structure and staff resourcing, and it might be too detailed and not available to us, but as far as ensuring our duty of care to the organisation and appropriate resourcing and being able to do that, are we able to get a more detailed breakdown of the different areas as well as the positions and the number of people in those positions?
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. CEO.
Thank you. I'm just having a moment of quiet reflection. I'll need to just reflect on that and take it on notice. Certainly we can provide a certain amount of detail. The question will be how much is reasonable and necessary. Thanks.
Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions. The first one, in response to a query from a resident about putting a yellow line to indicate parking restrictions on a section of road, I was told that council's policy is not to provide such markings where restrictions already exist under traffic law, such as, you know, within a certain distance of intersections. But I have noticed that there are other places within our city where there are yellow line markings on corners, and I was just wondering whether that's because we had a different policy at the time those markings were installed, or?
Thank you. Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, quite likely. I mean, it's probably a legacy issue. I mean, so we have our own internal traffic working group where we assess parking restrictions and requests that come in. We're trying not to have kilometres of yellow lines across all our municipality for the sheer cost, maintenance, looks and all those. We take due respect of the road rules as they apply, and people should not be parking in those areas. Certainly can have the specific area located to us where it may have, but highly likely that if there is one on the road that has been there for a number of years through previous personnel considering that request at that time. And I will actually add on through Mr Mulder's, Councillor Mulder's request, page 88 of the quarterly report does note that the design is complete for the Begonia Street traffic sealing project, but I will confirm to councillors on the status of that project.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. And there's also a mention on page 33. The second question, in regards to the Future of Local Government Review report, do we know what the next steps would be in terms of looking at the recommendations of that report, particularly, obviously there's none that affect us in relation to amalgamation or proposed amalgamations, but in terms of shared services, what would be the next steps in progressing that, should we wish to?
Thank you. Very good question. As you'll be aware, the consultation period runs through till 29th of February. We plan to use December and January at officer level to flesh out the 37 recommendations and develop our positional views on those, and then circulate those to councillors probably during the course of January to workshop in early February. So that will be a fairly substantial piece of work. In the background to all of that, we haven't had any contact yet from LGAT or any other bodies in terms of coordinating responses or things like that. It's all a bit new at the moment.
As you know, we only received it on Thursday night, I think, 4 o'clock or Thursday afternoon. But I would just like to commend the Honourable Sue Smith AM and her committee for the comprehensive report and some very fine recommendations made there. Councillor James.
Thank you. First question is, what's Council's cash reserves at the 30th of June 2023, please?
Thank you. Ms Murrell, please.
I have to take that one on notice. I wouldn't know the total off the top of my head.
My second question is in relation to the Kangaroo Bay Development Precinct and in particular the Kangaroo Bay Boulevard. On page 12 of the quarterly report, it says the process of sale of the land is ongoing. And in answer to my question at the previous council meeting, it said council is anticipating presenting a DA before Christmas regarding the boulevard development at Kangaroo Bay. So could I have some clarification on that as to whether we are going to seek the sale of that land? Alternatively, it's going to be on hold whilst the development application is being submitted.
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, please.
Thank you. I think it's difficult to conflate two things at once, Councillor James, on that side. As you'd be aware, a person can lodge a development application with the landowner's consent. So clearly anything that came forward from Hunter Developments would require our consent before it goes any further, and we haven't seen anything as of yet. The issue of the sale of the land is tied to the preferred developer agreement, and that's the next stage on. So in the context of where things stand at the moment, Hunter are choosing to develop another DA, another proposal for us to consider. One would assume that if that is supported by council through the DA process, they will also want to discuss that in the context of the sale agreement. Equally, they could choose to do it the other way around. So they're picking their pathway at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. First question is in relation to the consultation of the High Performance Centre that was recently conducted by Council. There is a fair bit of community interest in this matter. Can you please, if possible, specify when the community can expect the wider publication of the survey or some detail around the results?
I might defer that through.
Thank you, Ms Wicks.
The consultation results will go live after the council meeting we're preparing a report for on the 11th of December.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Wicks.
Noting your concern around Prolic's preambles to questions, but I think I need to put these assumptions in as I make this. In relation to the fire levy, which council receives 4%, if you like, handling fee, I would assume that 1% of that 4%, 1% would, you could say is eaten up by credit card surcharges, and that's being overly generous. I think you could suggest that the administration costs of it, as far as adding it to the rates bill, and it would be generously probably costing this organisation 1% again. So there's 2%. Noting that any outstanding debt council's accruing interest on. A question to perhaps the head of finance. Where have I got it wrong with my assumptions that council's getting at least 2% for clipping the ticket of this?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Ms Murrell.
Through you, Mayor, yes, your calculations are fairly accurate. Last year we received $270,000, so I'd have to step out the final calculations, but 1% for the administration is probably a little bit light on.
So just for clarification, this is a burden that you welcome in your role that you currently perform? collecting fire tax.
Yeah, I suppose it's not a bad percentage, but yeah, we would need to look at it and step it out on how much we all cost out to that.
Councillor Goyne.
Following on from my previous question from many iterations ago about vagrant animals, we currently have some sheep that like to go for a merry old stroll every morning along Rifle Range Road that I believe have no owners. They have been contained by members of the public because the public believes that they're probably better capable of doing it than council. Do we have any plans in place for further management of vagrant animals? Seems to be mainly in Sanford, but...
Mr Brennan, is that one for you?
I'd have to take that on notice to you, Mr Mayor, and find out some more details, I'm afraid.
And my second question is actually not his. So, and I think that's half the problem, everyone's blaming him. My second question is, there's been some nice little neat patchwork squares the whole way along the South Arm Highway, and I've had a few people asking me what they are because they're very symmetrical and in... Can I be enlightened as to what their purpose is?
Mr Graham.
It's a state government road, so I'll take that on notice and we'll ask their officers.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Councillor Good. Councillor Ducker, Councillor Warren, Councillor Chong.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Excuse me if I've missed an update on this, but can I ask where we're up to with the cat management policy discussions?
Mr Brennan, you again.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. We had planned to do a workshop on it, but there have been a number of very high priority time specific ones, so we've had to move it back a little bit into early 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Kennedy. Thank you. Well, colleagues, that now brings us to the closed meeting. I'll call for a motion to move into closed meeting, please. Move Councillor Hume, second Councillor Goyne. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Well, thank you to those members of the public who attended in person this evening and those joining us via the live stream. We now say good night. We'll see you here, same time, same place in 3 weeks' time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Please end the feed.